Welcome to technical session number 5. Seems like we're going back almost to the beginning. We're going to be talking a little bit about troubleshooting theory. And this works in IT as well as other aspects of life. When you're trying to solve particular problems, it's basically setting up a methodology for yourself to kind of work through in order to try to come to the solution of the problem. And so there's a few basic steps that we like to follow. And then there's some rules within those steps that we'll be talking about. Now, our objectives for this particular technical session are going to be to describe how to effectively troubleshoot using 6 steps of troubleshooting methodology, talking is hard, and use the troubleshooting steps and methodology to diagnose issues. We have different labs that we will try throughout the cohort and try to use troubleshooting as a mechanism to work on it. Behavior skills and mindsets we want to keep in mind. Communication, because that is always important, especially when dealing with our team members and our customers and all that kind of fun stuff. We want to be sure we are able to communicate effectively and in a manner which is most appropriate for who we're talking to. When I'm speaking to a coworker, I don't need to explain to them the intricacies of DNS and all that stuff and what its general purpose is and all that, because they already know. So I can move beyond, the basic definitional speak and get straight to the heart of the matter, so to speak. And one of the best features an individual can have with regards to troubleshooting is persistence. What do you do when you get knocked down? Do you take your ball and go home? Or do you stand up and try again? Now, we don't want to go the route of, Einstein's definition of insanity, which is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. No, we need to have a specific methodology in how we approach it. So, but we also want to make sure that we continue our pursuit of the problem to a point. All right, definition. What is troubleshooting? In essence, it is a logical form of problem solving. When troubleshooting is applied to a computer or any kind of technology, it is the process of using logical problem solving to fix a reported failure. All right. 1 second. Let me stop sharing. Let me get you guys this document here. All right. And drop it in here. So you won't be able to edit this document, but you can make a copy of it for yourself. So when you bring it up and you are, you see the document or what have you, click on File, bring it down, and this should not be grayed out at that point. And you should be able to make a copy of this document. This will kind of help you work through what we are working on today. This afternoon. Give me a green check or a yes when you have it downloaded and you are ready to go. Go. Okay, just, yeah, green check when you're ready to go. You got it downloaded, all that fun stuff. All right. Go ahead and bring our green checks down, ready to go. So, getting into our first rule. This isn't technically the rule. The rule will come up next. But the main thing we want to keep in mind whenever we are trying to troubleshoot any issue, we need to kind of approach it in a systematic way repetitively. Some of these rules or processes can be combined together as you become more efficient with this. But as you're just starting and you're developing your methodology, you're going to be more methodical and step by step as you go through the process, because you'll be developing those muscle memory, so to speak. And I'm not sharing, so that doesn't really help, does it? All right, so let's do that again. Probably makes more sense now when I'm talking. So yes, we want to approach the problem systematically. Same way every time. Because if we just kind of flying in by the seat of our pants every single time, like, oh, I got this, I know what the issue is, I can take care of it, it's no big deal, we will have a higher likelihood of missing important pieces. But if we develop our own approach and how we tackle these problems, and we stick to it each time, it makes it much less likely we will forget something or bypass something. Overall, 3 types of issues in general that you kind of come up with. Obviously, you could make different kinds of lists, but they tend to fall in 3 basic categories: either a hardware failure, a software failure, or a user error. Which do you think is the most common?
User error.
What? Why would you say such a thing?
Because people stupid sometimes.
That is a true statement. So it's either a lack of training, they accidentally clicked something, maybe they didn't pay attention during training, they're trying to do something they shouldn't be doing, they downloaded something they shouldn't have downloaded. There is a huge swath of reasons. Hardware failures are actually significantly more rare than people would think. Software issues are the second most common. And then lastly, wrapping up is hardware. Now, people in the industry have terms for the user error. And I encourage you not to use those when you're in front of a customer or talking to a customer, because they may be aware of this. One of them is called an ID10T error. If you don't know what that is, write it down and look at it. The other is PEPCAC error, which is an acronym that stands for problem occurred between keyboard and chair. So user error. So they have PEPCAC and ID10T errors. Anybody figure out the ID10T yet?
It's pretty obvious once you write it down.
Once you write it down, it makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? So, though they are funny, please do not use them in front of a customer. Like, I think we got an ID10T error here. Management, can you please come assist? Yeah, it does not work. If they are even remotely associated with somebody from IT, they are aware of that one. All right, so first step of any problem, we got to identify what the problem is. Are we solving a problem or are we treating a symptom? What does it mean when I say this? Solving a problem versus treating a symptom.
Treating a symptom is basically putting a band-aid over it, and solving a problem is fixing the entire thing.
There we go. So solving a problem is a little bit more like finding the root cause. Treating a symptom would be, you know, if somebody's sneezing, You know, like, okay, let's, you know, give them a tissue versus, oh, we purchased a cat recently and they're allergic to cats. So you can give them the tissue, it'll solve their problem right this second, but that issue is going to keep recurring. So solving the problem versus getting to the root cause. How do we do this? How do we know this? First, we got to interview the client. So I know many of us got into IT going, I hate dealing with people. I'm going to work with computers because I don't like dealing with people. And unfortunately, a huge part of what we do is people related. And so we have to interview the client, and we have to do it in such a way as to be able to draw out information that is vital or important to us being able to understand the problem from people who may or may not have any technical skill. Next, if we have an inkling there may be any kind of invasive procedures involved, we want to back up data. Make sure they've saved everything that they're working on, you know, and backups can be made. So how do I interview a client and try to get that information out of them, especially if they don't know anything about computers? Many people who work in offices know how to perform the tasks they are given, not necessarily have a good or knowledgeable interaction with computers on a day-to-day basis. So we want to use a series of open-ended questions. You want to avoid yes/no answers. So you're trying to get them to kind of tell you a story. And, you know, that would be something like, you know, oh, can you tell me what the problem is today? Oh, my computer's broke. Okay, well, can you show me what broke looks like? You know, something along these lines where you can have them explain to what happened. When did the problem start? It's not a yes or no question. What was the situation when the problem occurred? What programs were you using? What happened right before this issue occurred? Has anybody touched this computer or made any changes recently? Has there been any recent thunderstorms or electrical problems? Are you having power outages on a regular basis? This can cause damage to your systems if you don't have battery backups or, you know, USBs or uninterruptible power supply, UPSs, excuse me. Has someone else used your computer recently? That's a big one. It's like, oh, I just got to download this file to print. Here's my USB. Plug it in. You get something nasty, especially if it's like a customer or somebody coming in. USBs are a major source of issues. What valuable data on your system has not been backed up? You don't want to hear later, oh my gosh, you just destroyed 20 hours of work because they didn't save it. And then, can you possibly recreate the issue? Can you show me exactly what happened and when it happened? Because being able to duplicate the problem is a big piece of understanding what the problem is. All right, next rule. It's not step 2, it's rule 2. Establish your priorities. It's kind of like when we do triage. When we're triaging a ticket and trying to figure out what's the most important, how many people does it affect? We haven't really quite gone over that yet, but we will. But establish the priorities. You know, are we trying to get them up and running as soon as possible? Or are we trying to solve this problem? Is it something that can be done right now during the workday, or is it something that can be done later? So we need to establish our priorities. Is this something that can continue, like can start to spread and infect other systems? Do I need to quarantine this system? Get it off the network. If I suspect malware, that would be one of the first things I would do. So depending on what the problem is, our priorities will change and how we would approach them. Is it something that's annoying and inconvenient, but we can work around it? Like a laptop keyboard, they spill coffee on it, the keyboard doesn't work, but we can plug a keyboard in, they can continue to work while we either order another keyboard or get them another laptop or whatever we need to do. But they can continue to function, not optimally, but at least able to continue working. Always beware of user error. And this is where the show me, can you please show me what was happening when the error occurred? Can you walk me through the error again? You can see what they did. This is a little bit more difficult when you're working remotely, but this is the beauty of sandboxing. So if they work for our company and we have images created of their systems, we can boot up that image and that system they're using, and then follow along with the steps that they're doing to see if we can recreate that issue on another computer. And see, is it a software thing, or are they clicking on things that they shouldn't be clicking on? Are they forgetting to do things that they should be doing to move on? Like if they're supposed to be editing a document, does the document need to be unlocked and then put their password in before they can do any editing? Or do they even have access to edit that document? So these are potential user errors that we would be paying attention to. I know it's a bit redundant. Ask about data. Always back up data. So if it's not your system, if this is a third-party issue where, you know, say if you're working as a third-party contractor for Mac and just any Mac user is going to call in, this is going to be a little bit of a different scenario where you're going to ask them, have you backed up your data? Versus me being on site at a company where we are working and our customers are internal, we would typically do the backup of the data. And usually that's pretty easy. You can push an image to the server or save the recently changed information to the server. If you're running on virtual desktops, that information is remotely stored anyway, so it makes life a lot easier. But always back up the data. Because quite often the value of a computer is not in its hardware, but it is what is stored upon it. All right. Step 2. So step 1 was identify the problem. Now we're going to kind of examine the system and develop a theory. So once we have kind of developed this idea as to what the problem is, we're going to kind of shape in our mind how we would actually correct this problem, and then we can test to make sure that it actually is the problem. So we're going to establish a theory and make sure. So rule 5, not step 5, rule 5, divide and conquer. If you're working on teams, you can break larger problems down into smaller groups. If you assume it could be possibly a user error versus, say, a networking error, you can have one of you work on the network, one of you work on the user error portion to try to duplicate and confirm. So divide and conquer. This is a tough one for a lot of reasons. Make no assumptions. When we're talking to customers, and we've been doing this for quite some time, we will have a tendency to want to, especially on busy days, cut the customer off and say, I got it, I know what's going on. And then we go in, we try to jump in and solve the issue. Lo and behold, there was more story to tell. We just got to the tip of the iceberg. But it becomes more of a frustrating experience because we think we know what's going on. We treat the symptom and we send the customer on their merry way. And then 30 minutes, an hour, a day later, a very similar problem occurs and they come right back. And what do you think their mood is going to be if they have to come back a second time?
Frustrated.
Frustrated, angry, annoyed. Why didn't you fix it the first time? I thought you said you had this. Thought you said you knew what was happening. Why am I here again? What do we think their mood's going to be when they come in, if they have to come in a third time?
Furious.
Furious. Insta Karen, can I see your manager? You know, so each successive trip they have to make or call they have to make to come to try to get this problem solved, their demeanor is going to be less and less amicable. And they're going to be less and less wanting to comply, especially if it's like a user error. So if we thought it was a hardware issue and we solved it, but they went in and did the exact same thing again, how do you think they're going to react if we come to find out it's them causing the problem? Embarrassed,
Probably,
extremely angry.
probably gonna feel stupid.
Yeah, feel stupid, or they may not believe you at all. It may be a situation of like, you just can't figure it out, so you're trying to blame it on me. All of this can stem from just, making assumptions. So we want to try to avoid that, even if we do get busy. Doesn't mean you need to write a novel on the customer's life experience and, all the things that occurred in their life that may have led to this moment. I used to have a trucking company I dealt with, and whenever there was a problem, she would always start the conversation with, "So I got up this morning," and proceed to tell me everything that has happened in her day up until that point before the issue has occurred. When the only part of that conversation is relevant to me is the last 30 seconds of that conversation. It all started when I was born. Venus was in retrograde, and all of a sudden, my life, the die was cast, and I was destined to not be acceptable to technology. So, try not to make assumptions. And there's a couple assumptions to make, and based upon the person's vocabulary, they may, because people like to feel smart, they like to feel important. So they may use terminology that they don't fully understand to make you think that they know more about computers than they actually do, which can cause problems. Because then you're going to be speaking to them thinking that they understand what you're saying, and they're going to be a little too embarrassed to say, "Oh, by the way, I just heard those words on TV. I have no clue what they mean." So we have to be careful. And then there's the others that will dumb down their language and when they're having a conversation with you to see if you actually know what you're talking about. So it does go both ways. Rule number 7, we're still in step 2, but rule number 7, try the simple things first. If there's an issue with the computer, do I go straight to reformatting the hard drive? Maybe I want to try restarting it first, So we want to start with the simplest and least invasive things first. Try the silly problems. Remember, cables have 2 sides. Is it plugged in? Can you please check at the computer and at the wall? People often forget cables have two sides. Make sure you check it firmly, because it could have been bumped or something like that and appear like it's still in there, but it's mostly out, and therefore not getting a solid connection. So we want to start with those simple solutions first. Customers can get frustrated by this, but you kind of remind them patiently. It's like, look, I want to make sure I don't miss anything, and this process has, served me well in the past. I'm not sure what may have occurred prior. I just want to make sure we're double checking things. That's all, because I want to provide you with the best service possible. And then as you build in, then you're going to get into the more and more invasive measures. This is where I usually talk about the King method, because my former partner who taught with me for my first year, he used to work at Circuit City years ago, and they had one tool in their toolbox, and that was reformatting your hard drive. So if ever you brought anything to customer service at Circuit City, the first option they used was reformatting your hard drive. And they had some of the worst customer service I've ever experienced in my life. My worst customer experience I've ever had was with Circuit City. But they didn't try to troubleshoot things. They didn't try to figure things out. They would say, hey, we could do all of this stuff, but the surefire way to solve your problem would be to format your hard drive, and we will happily do that for you, and we can have your computer back to you this afternoon. So, most invasive, nuclear option. That was their troubleshooting method. We don't want to be that. So we don't employ the King method. So we're going to start at the least invasive, work our way in. Make sure the monitor is plugged in before we replace it, right? So one of the things we like to do with the customer is to follow this kind of process here for a best theory and test. Try to get them to reproduce the problem, or you try to reproduce the problem based upon what they're describing as happening. This is why it's critical to know what was happening at the moment the problem occurred. Decide if the problem is hardware, software, or user. Don't hold firm to that once you have that. This is just kind of you formatting your theory, essentially. And then at that point, you can make your theory based upon the source of the issue, and then we can work towards fixing it. Right? Become a researcher. Rule number 8. No one is the pentacle of all knowledge with regards to IT. I will never claim it. Your TAs will never claim it. Humans make mistakes, and our memories are fallible. Do your own research. See if you can find the same problems occurring on forums if you have not experienced this before. You may have internal documentation that you can look through. That would be your company's body of knowledge. So this problem may have occurred 6, 8, 10 months ago. And by looking through your company's IT software or whatnot, or your trouble help desk software, you may be able to find this problem and have a simple solution for it, but you can test and verify that this is what they experienced before. But you have to be able to research these issues based upon rough to minimal knowledge. But your understanding of the items involved, the lingo, will help you become a better Googler. Remember, there is a drastic difference between me saying I cannot connect to the internet versus I am unable to communicate with my DHCP server. One is going to give you much more targeted results. So we have to become effective Googlers. But there are layers, or basically layers that we work out from when we're trying to solve a problem. First is going to be us. What tools do we have in our toolbox? What problems have we experienced? How many times have we solved these? If it's within our wheelhouse and it's something we've seen a dozen times, we probably move to this portion really, really quickly. Beyond that, we would go to the company's body of knowledge. Has anybody in the company experienced this before? Has this issue come up with anybody in the company before? And be able to research it. From there, Google. I'm going to look at Reddit forums. I'm going to look at, other forums and see if I can see this issue has occurred before. IT community is usually pretty good about, hey, I've experienced this problem. Here's how I fixed it. Beyond that, we step to a coworker, somebody who may be more knowledgeable in this particular area. If it's telecoms, you may have a guy that's really good at telecoms. If it's security, you may have a lady who's really good at security. So wherever this issue may lie, you'd be able to go to that person and say, hey, I'm experiencing this issue. Have you seen this before? And then they may come and help you. If they have. If they haven't, and you've exhausted all these resources, then and only then would you go to a supervisor. If I go to my supervisor after step 1 every time, what do we think the result will be?
You're not adequate for the job. You might get fired.
First question they may ask you is, why did I hire you? If I'm doing your job, why did I hire you? So being a good researcher and being able to quickly locate and solve problems this way will make you invaluable. You don't have to be the biggest, baddest, smartest IT help desk professional in the world. Nobody's expecting you to be right out of the gate. But becoming a good researcher will make you invaluable, not only at that moment, but going on into your careers. Of course, then there becomes the issue of sometimes these problems haven't occurred before, people have not solved them before. And you can be the one who helps others make a YouTube video, post it on Reddit, other IT forums. Here's what I've experienced. Here's how I solved the problem. I do not see anybody else talking about this. So you can make your contribution to the community as well. And it could be something small or it could be something huge. All right. Pause it really quick. A few questions for you. All right. So, step 3. So we have identified the problem, establish the theory. What do we think's happened? Next, we're going to test our theory. This is where we try to reproduce results and verify that what we think is causing the problem is actually causing the problem. If we test our theory and we find out what we thought it was not correct, we go back to step 2, start over again. So let's test our theory. Let's see here. Anybody ever watch Mythbusters? Guy in the beret, and then there's the redheaded guy, Adam Savage. The redheaded guy had a very funny yet profound quote during the, he had a few of them during the show, but one of them was basically, what's the difference between science and messing around? And that's writing things down. So you can actually document your results and see if there's correlation. So write things down. What have we tested? What did we do? Because sometimes the process isn't as clear as we would like it to be. Sometimes testing the theory and retesting a theory, establishing new theories, we need to document this entire process. So we need to show this in our help desk software. So people who come behind us later, if they experience the same problem, they can sit there and say, okay, with this issue, they tried this, they tried this, they tried this, they tried this. None of these things work, but finally they did this, and this helped it. So they could go down to the bottom, test the theory out, and see if they were correct. And you can save future people more time. Could even be yourself. Because if you experience a problem one time and you don't see that problem for another year, and then it comes up again, what do you think the likelihood of you remembering exactly what solved that problem is going to be? Pretty slim,
low.
right? Pretty low. You've only experienced the problem one time, so it's a rare problem. Well, this is where writing things down becomes important, because once we have that, then we can go back, troubleshoot that problem, and go to our own notes in our system and be able to solve it very, very quickly rather than going through that whole process yet again. So documentation is not just about covering your tuchus or trying to help out your coworkers. This is something that can help you out as well, especially if it's uncommon problems that you're taking care of. And if you're going to be in tier 2, tier 3, that's the majority of what you're going to be dealing with is uncommon problems. Because tier 1 is going to handle the quick and easy stuff, right? So write things down, document your efforts. Don't assume the worst. Somebody comes in and is unable to see any of their files, the first things out of our mouth should not be, my condolences on your loss. We want to at least do a little research first. Also, if we assume the worst and we assume that the damage is irreparable, what's our approach going to be?
King.
King method. We're ripping out the motherboard and replacing it with a new one, right? So if we assume the worst, our actions are going to be based upon the worst assumptions. And we may do overkill. We may actually destroy data or systems that could possibly have been saved. So don't assume the worst. Take it a piece at a time. Reboot and start over. It is extremely scary how many problems can be solved with a reboot. Which is why it's usually the first thing out of their mouth when you try to solve a problem. So much so that it became a meme with the IT crowd. Thank you for calling IT. Have you tried turning it on and off again? It is essentially a meme at this point. But yes, and it is so because it solves so many issues with phones, with tablets, with printers, with computers, anything IT based, because you're clearing out that cache memory and it may resolve your issue. And if the issue pops back up again, then you get to kind of see it happen again or get a better idea as to what might be causing it. It could be they have 97 windows open on their web browser and they've run out of RAM. So reboot and start over solves a lot of issues. Anybody here have Comcast? Anybody ever had to call in to Comcast for an issue with one of their routers? What's the first thing they make you do, Justin, before they will even allow you to speak to a human?
Have you tried unplugging the router and plugging it back in?
Oh, it's worse than that. They do a reset on your router. So they quite literally do the King method as step 1. And so whatever settings you have on your router and all that stuff has to get wiped out before they will even let you speak to a human. And if you refuse to do it, they'll do it remotely, just to have fun. Yes, after waiting for 3 hours in mind. Perfect example. You know, because I've had issues where it was just like I needed one simple thing done, and they're like, their response is generally, no, we have to reformat your router, you know, just to make sure everything is okay. And then I have to basically reestablish all my settings, set up all my stuff again, all that fun business. All right, so we've established a theory where we've identified the problem. We've established a theory. We've tested our theory. We've gotten through all of these steps, and we now have a solid idea as to what's causing our problem. What do we do next? We plan our solution and fix the problem. Billy Joe spilled coffee on his computer, and the keyboard is not working. I had a theory that it must have been the caramel mocha latte that, you know, Billy Joe was drinking. And once I've established that, I tested it. I pressed a few keys. Yep, it's broke. So I could plan my solution and fix the problem. I walked to the tech closet. I pulled out a keyboard. I came over. Bam, plugged it in. Problem solved. So I planned for my solution and fixed it. It may be more to that, like I have to replace the keyboard in the laptop now, which is going to be more invasive, or I have to replace the laptop because much more damage was done when the coffee was spilled. So we planned for the solution and we fixed the problem. Kind of straightforward on that one. Again, fall back to this rule again, use the least invasive solution first. It'd be less invasive for me to grab a keyboard and plug it in than for me to take Billy Joe's laptop and say, hey, I'll return this to you in a week when I can, you know, when the new computer, the new keyboard parts arrive in IT. So he may have data on there that he needs. Won't be able to do any work for a week. Some of us may be okay with just sitting there and drinking coffee all day. Some of our bosses may not appreciate that. So least invasive solution first, or if we can apply a temporary fix to buy time. Know your starting point. So some of the issues that come up with computers are not as objective as we would like them to be. One of the more common ones you'll hear is my computer is running slow. Well, if the computer is running slow, what does running normal look like? So saying something is running slow is kind of a subjective term, right? So my slow may be Billy Joe's lightning fast, you know? So we have to establish a baseline. So there is software we can use for situations like, you know, computer speed and stuff like that, where we can establish a baseline just to make sure how the computer is running then versus when we're done, did we make any market improvement? So something to think about. So know your starting point. What does it look like now? And what does it look like when we're done? Did we make any improvement? This is where many IT people fail. Step 5. So identify the problem, establish the theory, tested the theory, put a plan of action into and solve the problem. So many IT people walk away right here. What if it's a user error? What's going to happen?
I'm gonna come right back.
It's going to happen again, right? We already talked about this. If it happens again, what's their attitude going to be like when they call you the next time?
We're angry.
Unpleasant. Angry, unpleasant, perturbed. We want to try to avoid that where we can, right? So in order to do this, we need to verify that the problem has been solved. So we verify functionality and we take preventative action. Billy Joe, please don't drink caramel lattes and set them next to your keyboard. Perhaps set them on another table. Or when I was working in a prairie dog farm, I would always put my drink in the corner of my cubicle. That way I could not physically bump it to knock it over. So we would take preventative action. Do they need to be trained a little bit on what not to click to cause this problem? So, and then when we do preventative action, if it involves training of an employee, we have to do this in a tactful manner so as not to insult, upset, or make them feel degraded, because people don't generally like it when they've realized they're the one that made the mistake. So we have to be understanding of that fact and just like, hey, kind of stuff kind of happens all the time. I've had it happen at least a dozen times myself. Let me just kind of show you what I figured out over time to kind of help prevent this from happening. So we do some end user education, but try to take the sting out of it being their fault, even though we may know it is. All right. So that's step 5. And then lastly, can anybody think about what we got to do last? So we tested it, we've solved the problem, we verified it. Customer thinks we're awesome. What do we do next?
Ensure that they're satisfied.
Make sure they're satisfied. Well, that's what we're doing right here, right? Verify functionality, take preventative action. All right.
Explain.
Documents and everything.
What was that, George?
I was gonna explain to them what you just did.
Okay.
And
Possibility.
document what you did.
Document. Got several people spamming that one in chat. Document what we did, how we got to where we got. We solved the problem, we verified the solution, we trained the customer. Here's what we did. So the story that we tell in our desktop software or whatever, it has to have a beginning, a middle, and an end, right? The story starts with a problem. We have the journey to the solution, and then we have to have a conclusion, right? Before we close it out. That way, if this problem comes up a year from now, we could solve it again. Or one day when we have to train someone to be an effective help desk technician, if they come across our notes, they're like, man, I'm listening to this person. So story has to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. Doesn't mean you need to write a novel. This is where communication comes in. We have to assume, I know it says don't make assumptions, but when we're writing notes in our help desk software, we're assuming that it's going to be technicians reading it. So our communication has to be as such. So document your findings. All right. Oh, frowny face. So here's kind of a step diagram on this one. So problem comes in. Oh, it's broken. Identify the problem. Okay, we've identified the problem. Billy Joe spilled coffee on his laptop. Establish a theory. I think the liquid may have broken it. Test the theory. Go up. Poke our fingers on the keyboard. Doesn't work. If it doesn't work, we would move on to evaluate the results. Is it working? No, it's not working, but we know that our theory is confirmed. If our theory is not confirmed, we go back to establish another theory. Maybe it wasn't the caramel latte that killed the keyboard. Maybe it's the fact that half the keys are missing. So we would establish a new theory, test that theory. So you can have a recursive loop here where you keep establishing theories, testing it, it's wrong. Keep establishing a theory, testing it, wrong. So general rule is after about 3 theories or 4 theories, that's when escalation needs to happen. You've tried a couple things, it didn't work out. Nice try. It's time to bring in, another team member to assist, either moving it up to tier 2 or what have you, because you don't want to have the person there for the entire day while you continually test theories, right? So 3 theories, escalate. After that, say you got it right though, establish plan of action, implement the plan, verify system functionality, document your findings. We had a good day, yay. Right? Now, if we went through our 3 theories and we're not able to diagnose the problem properly, and it had to get escalated to tier 2. This is where persistence comes in. Not necessarily continually trying to establish a theory, but one, understanding when you're using up too much time, you need to escalate it so the problem can get solved. But after that point, you've been knocked down, right? You couldn't solve the problem. What do you do next? Follow up. Find out what the problem was. So the next time you face it, you'll be able to recognize it. This could mean just going back and checking the notes on the ticket to verify what it took to solve it. It could be speaking to someone in tier 2 and saying, hey man, what did you figure out being the problem on that one? And how did you know that was the issue? Expand your education. This is where persistence comes in. Is it just a case of it's out of my hands, I'm done, hands off from this point, next caller, please? Or do we want to keep adding to our toolbox? The more tools we have, the more valuable of a team member we are. All right. Oh, sorry. Let's see here. Jamal, can you read for us, please?
As an IT professional, you are working on a computer that will not produce audio. You have already interviewed the client and learned the following. The audio stopped working 3 weeks ago. It was working and then suddenly stopped. The client hasn't seen any error messages. The client hasn't made any updates or changes to their machine. The data on the machine was backed up an hour ago.
Possible theories. So problem, no audio. What are some theories?
Sound card may have an error.
Sound card. Well, they didn't get any error messages, but it could be a sound card, yeah.
Could be that their audio device is malfunctioning.
Audio device malfunctioning.
Cable
Anything else?
unplugged.
Cable unplugged, could be. Yeah, there you go.
Audio drivers not updated.
Audio driver's not updated.
I like what
Sound
Aaron
card.
said. It said muted.
There we go. Let's go simple. Maybe
True.
it was muted.
Might need a system update.
Might need a system update. So we got a bunch of theories here. So simplest one first. How do we check? How do we explain the customer or ask them to check if it's muted? Okay. Yeah, there's another one, Justin. Driver updated itself and then we lost audio.
Could say something like, can you please check and see if it's muted for me?
How would I do such a fantastical thing? I'm not a tech person.
It's in the bottom right corner. Oh, that's sound. Never mind. Wait, no, I'm right. I can't.
So bottom right, there's nothing in the bottom right-hand corner.
Do you see an arrow?
Well, I mean, I do see an arrow, I guess, but my Mac hasn't really. I
You
never
have a
have
Mac.
anything in the
Maybe,
bottom right
maybe the first step would be to identify what kind of the system they're using.
True,
corner.
true. Instead of doing the painful thing that I just did.
So what did we do, Brandon?
Well, if you have a Mac,
We made an assumption, didn't we?
I did, yeah. I assumed that you had a Windows because I have a Windows, you know.
And 85% of the time, you would be right.
True, but the 1% I'm not.
So we're not making assumptions, right? You know, like, oh, could you please tell me what kind of system you're working on? And then you can kind of work from there. But proves a point. So we would start testing this theory to see if our issue is this, right? So we can work through the whole process based upon that. And possible solutions, number one, audio is muted, right? 2, speakers came in plugged. So check your cords. Virus has infected the system. That's kind of doom and gloom, but hopefully it didn't go that far. Bad installation on a sound driver. Configuration problems with the sound card, although generally you would get an error message on something like that. Or simply just a problem of compatibility between the operating system and the sound device you're trying to use. You know, is the audio file you downloaded compatible with your system? These things happen. But in general, we want to try to remember these steps. So first, Germanesh, can you tell me what is the first step of troubleshooting?
Identify the problem.
Identify the problem. Very good. Arthur, can you tell me what is the second step of troubleshooting?
The second step,
So we identified the problem.
shoot, I don't remember. Can I get some help in chat?
You're gonna phone a friend.
Yeah.
Establish a theory?
Establish a theory. There you
Establish
go.
a theory.
Identify the
Okay.
problem. Establish a theory. All right. Tamika, can you tell me what is the third step? We've identified the problem. We've established a theory. What do we do next?
Test the theory.
Test the theory. Awesome. Establish or identify problem. Establish a theory. Test the theory. Very good. Right. Let's see here. LJ, can you tell me the fourth step? What do we do after we have identified, established, and tested our theories? All right, Joseph, come off mute. Tell us.
You want to establish a plan of action and a resolution.
Establish a plan of action and solve the problem, right?
Yes.
Very good. Thank you, sir. That's 4. Mudasir, can you tell me step number 5? What are we looking at? What was that? Not document. What is the main thing that a lot of IT people forget to do? What was that, India?
Verify.
I said, listen.
Yeah, that is, yeah, I will give you that one. Absolutely. They do forget to listen. But there we go. Yes. Mudasir, verify functionality and take preventative action. So do we have to do any kind of training? Why is it a bad idea for people to click on hyperlinks and emails from people they don't know?
Because information can get stolen.
There you go. So we want to have, we need to have some preventative trainings sometimes to explain what's going on. All right, Yidnik, please take us home. What is step number 6, please? You're muted. Make no assumptions. That's a good, it's a good one, but hopefully we're not doing that at the very end.
Document the findings.
There we go, Jatoria. Document our findings. So all together, we got identify our problem, establish a theory, test our theory, plan of action, and resolve the problem, right? Step 4. Step 5, verify that we fix what we set out to fix and take preventative action if needed to prevent it from happening in the future. And finally, document our findings, tell our story. What happened? How did we get here? Very good. I would take heavy note of those 6 steps. They will come up again and again and again. They love to ask about it on 1101 and 1102. So this is not a one-off. It is one that comes up. And the main thing that should be a takeaway from here is you need to establish your own theories, your own troubleshooting methodology. This is a starting point. There is no silver bullet. There is no perfect system. You have to find one that works for you. But this can be a starting framework for you to build on, especially depending on the type of industry you get into. But you can apply it to more than just IT. So, questions, comments, concerns, complaints, revelations?